Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Uh, kind of do a two-part video here about just sort of the state of modern comic books. We're not going to talk really negative about comic books. That's the easy kind of thing to do, and certainly we believe there's issues. We kind of wanted to talk about, I think, what the most important part of comic books is and what brings readers into this, and that's canon and continuity. And so, part one we'll do today is just talking about, does canon and continuity really even matter anymore? And then the second part that we'll probably dive into is, do we think some of these offshoots, like Absolute and Ultimate Universe, should actually just be the future in everything that comics does? But we'll start with canon and continuity. Mike, it's certainly gotten convoluted over time. It is almost impossible with any of these characters at this point to put together kind of a straightforward timeline of life event between deaths and resurrections and retcons and flashpoints and crises and all kinds of things. Do you think canon and continuity matters anymore in the big two? Obviously, indies are doing a good job of keeping it for most, but do you think for DC and Marvel that canon and continuity, do you think they even matter anymore?
For the big two, they in my view, they've strayed so far away from continuity and have broken so many things and tried to fix so many things that it's just a big mess. Um, you know, they my potential sub list is cut by 2/3 because I don't know what's going on with the X-Men or Spider-Man anymore, Captain America. I don't know what's going on. It Thor, one of my favorite heroes of all time. It got so weird and convoluted that I I cut all those books out of my sub list, and I can't
Mhm.
imagine. I don't know how many more people there are like me that would normally pick up another 5 or 6 titles if they could follow the darn thing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure I'm not alone, but that's just kind of what happened to me organically over the last 20 years. And I decided to stick with my handful of titles, and aside from a few relaunches like the Absolute and the Ultimate Universe, I generally don't dip my toes in the water. And I think that continuity was a real concern with some of these with the big two, certainly through the 80s and into the 90s somewhat. But by the turn of the century, it really started to get wackadoodle. And it went sideways so many times that and then people would try and come in and correct it, but then that would be a mess. And then after somebody, say for example, somebody was successful at correcting it, the person after it would just go and mess it all up again. So I think they're just kind of a wink and a nod to continuity right now in the main titles, and I don't think they really know what to do from here. And I, for one, would not be disappointed if continuity just went away and we launched these new series titles and stories. And I am enjoying several of them, and,
Yeah.
and and the reason I'm enjoying them is because they have no attachment really to continuity that is wherever it is. So yes.
I think it's a weird thing in that continuity was probably the greatest asset that these comic books used to have, and I think it's now its greatest enemy. I think when you had these detailed backstories that you and I have both talked at times about searching down old comic book runs and how cool it was to find like issue 25, like, oh man, there's 24 other issues of this I can go
Yeah,
find. Right.
exactly.
And I think Stanley is quoted with saying what every comic is somebody's first comic, I believe
any
is
any comic has the potential to be somebody's first comic.
and I think comics used to do a better job of that. What they do now is they write for the trade, and I can have my problems with it, but it's understandable. People are trade weighting these things, if you want sales on Amazon, if you want your graphic novel, you have to write that way. And so comics is kind of serving so many masters right now because you want the Amazon sales, which is not your comic shop Wednesday Warriors, but you want your Wednesday Warriors too. And so they kind of have to write for the trade so that the main sales are good, but then write for the, and it just, it ends up pleasing nobody. And where continuity has now gotten, because we're 60, 70, 80 years in on these characters, there's just too many things for it to work the way that it used to. When every single character has died, when every single character has been, when death has no meaning anymore, it's really hard for anything to have any meaning in your universe. Like I read JSA this week, and they killed Wildcat in that comic, and it was a well done, poignant scene. There's 0% chance that I believe Wildcat is gone and done. Like I'm like, when is he coming back? And
Yeah.
I think that's the problem with continuity going for so long is you end up creating scenarios like they have now where it's just, and of course you kill a character off, do you really want them to be dead for the remainder of comic books if they're a superhero? Probably not. Your side characters, your Uncle Bens and stuff like that, you probably could, but you can't really, in the storytelling lexicon they really probably feel like, man, we can't take a Daredevil off the board permanently or something like that. And so I do think at this point, I would agree with you in that I think I would be a fan of comic books of the big two going to a loose continuity. And the example I would use of that is like James Bond. When you watch before Daniel Craig, when you watch the first 20 Bond films, there's a loose continuity. Bond is always a British spy who works for MI6. He always has a flirtatious relationship with Moneypenny, an antagonistic relationship with Q.
Yeah.
He and M have a father, son, or older brother, younger brother dynamic. Bond was married, his wife died, and that's really it. Those are the only real through lines that carry through in James Bond movies.
He always gets the girl,
He
and he always
and
gets the bad
there's
guy.
certain immutable characteristics like he's gonna chase a lot of ladies. He's quite
Yeah.
good with firearms.
Yeah.
And when you watch it, you
And
can watch
cool
any Bond.
gadgets. Don't forget those cool
Q
gadgets.
Branch, yeah. You can
Yeah.
watch any Bond movie of those first 20, and none of them are really like, what is going on? And yet, if
Yeah.
you do watch them all together, you're like, okay, it's the same thing. But you can watch those in any order. And while you may not get it 100%, and none of them are unfulfilling because of that, right? If they're bad, it's because the movie's not that great. Although I'd argue there are no bad James Bond movies. I think Conan does this very well. There are certain huge landmark moments in Conan's life, right? The death of Belit is typically something that is always there at the time that he's a king, right? But you can insert little adventures here and there. They're like, oh, this took place between these events. And I think that's what comic books should do is I would almost have them kind of write like a character two-page bio of like, here's the essentials of Batman. Here's the essentials of Spider-Man. And we see them do this with TV series. Like when Batman the Animated Series started, they didn't need to show me Bruce Wayne's origin story from the first. You kind of just get he's a rich kid, his parents died, he's got a lot of gadgets, got a lot of tech, some things have happened to him. He's not a rookie, but you could have anything happen and it could be the first time it's there. And so I think as long as they stick to the characterization, I don't think canon's is important anymore. As much as that breaks my heart to say that, because that used to be my favorite part
And
of the stories but it's been stretched so much now that I think I'd actually be a bigger fan of a loose continuity, and it would actually make me less angry when they break stuff.
I think so. And you got to look at the origins. I'll take us down history lane in about 2 minutes. Um, the continuity was built on the backs of this fledgling industry, and the editors that controlled the continuity for the big two. There were several of them, but the ones that come to mind first and foremost are the Silver Age ones, um, like Julie Schwartz and of course Stan Lee. And then later you had a strong editorship by Jim Shooter and what have
Yeah.
you, who tried to rein in what was happening in the 80s with Marvel and put out, books that, adhered to continuity and stayed on track. These editors were very powerful, and they took what they were doing extremely seriously because back then there was no movie deals or video games. The
Mhm.
comic books had to sell themselves so that they could perpetuate the businesses. And if they didn't sell, they were out of work. And so it was a very real thing to hang on to the continuity and carefully steer the ship. Whereas
Mhm.
now, the comics books could sell, they couldn't sell, doesn't really matter to the higher ups. It's just an idea farm. Whatever you throw, let's see if it sticks to the wall. That kind of thing has been pervasive in recent years. And now we have this continuity that's all a mess. And guys like me have been buying comics for 50 years. 2/3 of the comics I'm not buying anymore because I'm just like, whatever.
Well, and even the ones that are doing things that we like, it's kind of repetitive because the continuity's been done before. Like, I bring up your favorite character, Barry. How many times has Barry and Iris now almost been married since they were already married a long time ago? And it's like we just have gotten to a point, and it's
But
sad in my
I like
opinion.
your idea. Like, this could have happened before they got married, and this is
Yeah,
an
you
adventure.
just have certain
Yeah.
cultural touchstones that happen. Like James Bond, they'll write books and they kind of place it. Okay, this was before Bond's wife died, and this
Yeah.
is that kind of. And I think that sort of fits because it keeps the character like Conan, I think, does it perfectly. And I'm not just talking the Titan Comics one. There were a hundred or so Tor fantasy novels, I want to say in the 90s, these little 200, 300-page paperbacks that had Robert Jordan wrote a few, Steve Perry, a couple different guys. Those were great because it's a Conan adventure, but it sticks and adheres to certain points of Conan's life. Okay, this is before the pirate days with Belit. This is before King Conan. This is
Yeah.
after he, leaves to marry Red. And I think if you do that, you can, if you at least establish some goalposts of, okay, these are the core tenets of the character, and maybe 5 or 6 huge events that don't change, then I think you could write better stories because right now what we do, and there's so much anger towards breaking of canon and breaking of continuity. And look, I don't like when they do it, but it's a fact of comics now. They're going to do that. It's not going to make sense. You just kind of have to adjust to where it is. And so I think, if you took any character, you could probably find 10 to 12 people very easily who could tell you what are like the huge things about Spider-Man
And
or
that's all
Green
you
Lantern.
need.
Right.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, Uncle Ben's dead, Gwen Stacy's death. He likes Mary Jane, has a flirtatious relationship with Black Cat. You kind of, as long as you keep those sort of core tenets, you could probably organize those puzzle pieces a little differently. And as long as you don't stray off of he used to work at the Daily Bugle, like as long as
Yeah.
you keep those, you're okay. It's where like I think the Daredevil show on Netflix has worked. It's not perfectly canon to the comics, but there's enough there that any Daredevil fan is going to read that and see that and go, that fits with the character, the key moments happened. And I think as long as you laid out kind of a loose continuity like that, I think comics could do this. It would probably give
There.
them a special incentive to do a zero issue where they go through and explain what are these events and all that. I think if you did that and kind of laid out for folks, here's the huge events that have happened. These are the only things that are considered canon anymore. Because the hard part now is we have some writers love to reference obscure stuff with like something happens like review Alpha Flight 47. It's like that's cool that they do that. But then you have other people and even some great writers. Grant Morrison's Batman run, he totally read it wrong or misremembered that Talia al Ghul and Bruce Wayne were actually together. He misremembered that she took advantage of him. And so
Yeah.
Talia got put on this villainous track because the writer didn't remember continuity well for a long time. And it can happen. And Grant Morrison knows more about comic books than I've, probably ever known in my life, but even they can make mistakes like that. And so when you have writers of that caliber who can make mistakes, you have to, I think you just have to get to where it's a little simplified. I think it would make it easier. I think it would make it
I
if
think
Grant Morrison and Mark Waid and great writers like that, if they can't keep it straight, then who has a real chance to even do that?
I think you're onto something there. A case in point to Daredevil. If more comic books were written like the new Disney show, where you have enough of the elements and you could still tell a good story. I know there's a lot of detractors to Daredevil out there at the show, that
Yep.
it's not this and it's not that. But just like you said about James Bond, and like you said about the Daredevil, I'm a tertiary Daredevil fan. I'm all in on this show. I recognize what I need to recognize, and I'm ready to go for the adventure.
Well, and I think what it would also do is the goal, like Stan Lee's quote of every comic has the potential to be someone's first comic. If you just have these huge key points, you can hand the books to anybody and they kind of just go, okay, like Conan, Titan, I'll give that credit, right? I can hand issue 16 of Conan to my brother who hasn't read Conan and he can read it and he's okay with it. Like, it's not like, what the heck is going on? Like, there's a few issues here and there, but for the
Absolutely.
most part, he could walk into the shop, buy the next issue of Conan on the stands,
And be
and he
okay
might
with it.
have to hunt down one or two issues,
Yeah,
but it's not going to be like right now. If you try to go grab your average issue of Thor, and it's the hard part is, and this is where it is sad to me, but like even if I grab the newest issue of Thor as someone who's read like 500 issues of Thor, it doesn't even make sense to me anymore because even if I keep straight and know the complete timeline of Thor, we've done things so many times, and certain writers decide some things are canon and some things aren't canon anymore on a whim. And so I think if we just got to where we had a loose continuity, that might be better. It might make it more approachable for readers. It might make it as sad as that is for me to see it go, because I think it used to be the greatest asset that comics had was this rich history. I just think as we've gotten to where manga's the competition, where everybody can find real identifiable short runs, you may need to go to it. But let us know. What do you guys think below? What do you think about canon and continuity? Is it something that keeps you from reading comics? Is it the only thing that continues to make you read comics? Do you think going to more of a loose continuity? And I think it's important. I would say a loose continuity that means the characters stay the characters. I think that's the other huge thing that I would say if they do a loose continuity. You still have to have Peter Parker act like Peter Parker. You
yeah,
can't do loose continuity, but now Peter Parker kills people or something like that. Like you got to
no.
have certain cultural touch points. But let us know. What do you guys think below? We'll come back with a second part of this. We're going to talk about the ultimate universe and the absolute universe and whether we think little kind of initiatives like that might actually be the future of comics as well. As always, thanks for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.